My first working experience with David Lynch was on Dune, and didn't really know what to expect after having seen Eraserhead, and I met one of the most charming, engaging, friendly guys who also happened to be from the Northwest. And I would go to his office and bother him all the time and ask him questions, and I wanted about this and I wanted about that. And he was good for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then he would start doodling on a piece of paper, and I knew that I'd lost him. Pretty soon I just sort of stopped asking the questions and began relying more on what I thought and what I imagined it should be, and he seemed to be content with that. And it's fun to play a character that seems to have that kind of capacity to step so easily into his subconscious and to believe so readily, and to not only believe in it but actually sort of revel in it. You know, he enjoyed the smell of the Douglas firs and the taste and the aroma of good hot black coffee, and et cetera, et cetera. Working with David as Gordon Cole was difficult because he's very committed when he's an actor, and it's hard to keep a straight face.
Cooper, you remind me today of a small Mexican chihuahua.
And his Gordon Cole was surprisingly not nominated as a Best Supporting Actor. I think he was probably always a little upset that didn't happen. I jest. But he just, ultimately David was so enjoyed the world of Twin Peaks that he almost can't help himself, and he just loves to participate, and I think he wanted to become a part of that world in some way, and that was his way of doing it.
Great! Pay dirt! You have to speak up, Sheriff. Hearing's gone. Long story.
So much of the credit you have to give to David and to Mark Frost for thinking up the idea, writing a terrific pilot, because I think on the strength of that pilot, which I think is as good as anything even today and would stand up as a feature film, they were able to really build a very strong vessel, and they launched it, and it was very powerful. But we were sort of not really prepared for the echo, I guess, of the show, which continues today. I do think it gives me hope to think that things don't necessarily have to make sense within the realities of these characters and these people for an audience to enjoy and return to, what we made.
I was fresh from Reno, Nevada, and just come to Hollywood wanting to be an actress, and I had been modeling and doing music videos and commercials and stuff. And so part of the process is you sort of go in and meet different casting directors around town and, audition for them. And so I had gone a few times for Joanna, and I happened to get cast and went through this lengthy network testing process for the pilot of Baywatch. And I ended up getting it, and at the same time got a call from Joanna and said, I really want you to come in and meet David Lynch. He's doing a show. And I'm like an innocent 16, 17-year-old girl going, oh, okay, I remember Dune, So I went in to a room with Joanna and David, and I even think that Eric might have been helping the audition process and reading for people. And actually originally read for Lara Flynn's part. And sort of at the end of the reading, he was like, that was really good. Well, I'm doing a show. Do you think you might want to be in it? And I was like, sure. I always had a hard time remembering to be afraid of Eric because he's really sweet, and before and after, like swinging the soap in a sock around about to beat me, he was sort of giggling, and so it was quite a challenge to be serious about that. But I remember that was a very sort of creepy, dark stage of Shelley's journey.
No! You bastard!
I think that David is an original artist. He's like this open channel to the creative forces that come down. I feel very lucky to have been involved in it and to continue to have a friendship with David. Every time I get frustrated with the business and the politics of it, I, will go over and talk with David and go, okay, there is true artists still left that still stick to their guns and still create, and maybe not be embraced by commercialism as a whole, as a monster, but there's so many people that appreciate his work that I just feel very honored to have been involved in it.
David had meetings with people, and before we'd read the script, so we didn't know where we fit in. And then we were just told that he and Mark saw me as this character, Audrey. And me and my manager looked through the script, well, she's not here. There's no, there's maybe a page or like a little dialogue, or, she's in the school, or she comes out in her saddle shoes. But we had no idea. So we were a little, excited, of course, to work with David, but worried, do you not like? It's very, so what ended up happening was just this beautiful character blossomed. I just never would have known going into it that she was going to be that specific and that clear and that, that fun, that much fun. So she became much more than I ever expected her to be. Basically what happened in the Miss Twin Peaks contest was that Sherilyn didn't want to be in the Miss Twin Peaks contest. And I had this aversion to all of them strutting around. I was like, come on, And I probably was being difficult. But that's okay, because David didn't mind. So he decided that I would have to be there and give a speech anyway, because I was going to be there no matter what. But that I was in it, but I didn't do it all the way. I didn't run around in a leotard, basically.
You must fight to save it, or lose it forever. Thank you.
Out of all the directors that we worked with and people that would come and go and some would come back again, for me it was the best when David was there, because sometimes, in my opinion, again, I feel like David encourages one to go into dark places inside of them and see what's going on and to embrace them, that's beautiful, that's good. And I think sometimes people came onto the show and would just do weird things for the sake of being weird. And I feel that part of David's work is soul-based, and it's a part of his truth on some very personal level. And it's not, let's just shock value and be weird for being weird. The show wouldn't have been a success if that's what it was about. It had a bottom of truth. The funny thing about going into Twin Peaks, I remember seeing the pilot and thinking, well, I don't know if anyone's going to see this, and everyone's sleeping with everyone. And I had no perspective whatsoever. And I feel that it's endured. I feel this show's endured because we're starved for original work. I believe in film and in television, and especially back then in television. It really was that David didn't care what they were saying in terms of what the ratings people, you have to go through this group of standards and this, and they didn't care. They weren't answering to so many people. I feel like they stayed true to a vision. There weren't too many cooks in the kitchen. They had their original idea. They stayed true to it. And weren't afraid to do a show that wasn't necessarily about all these likable people, but more real people. But more than anything, I always feel like just television starved for something original, for something that doesn't insult their intelligence or, gets you thinking, and the way David's work always does.
When I met Joanna Ray, I was 18, and I just moved here, and she was casting a Spielberg-produced show called Amazing Stories, and she brought me in for a lot of different episodes, and I never got one of them, and she just always kind of stuck with me. And I knew Eric, her son, also, Eric DeRay, Leo, from when he was working with her. And so, from what I've heard, David saw a headshot that I had, and It was a headshot that wasn't even a professional headshot. It was just a friend of mine took a picture, and it was kind of this really cool, more artsy than sort of glamorous shot. And so he called me in, and I went in, and I remember when I walked into the room, Eric was there, greeting everyone, and I talked to Eric, and he said, "Man, isn't this amazing?" And we talked about the script, and I was like, "Yeah, the woman with the curtains and the curtain rods and all that," and we were laughing about it. And then they brought me into the room, and it was just a meeting with David and Mark, and at the end of the meeting, he goes, now, Bobby doesn't smile a lot." And I said, "Oh, no, I won't smile. I'm never going to smile again," because I always, laughing and stuff, but so that was the greatest, easiest thing. We just went in and had this meeting, and I didn't even read or anything. There was a fan on top of the building, and this fan, it was like a vent fan, and you could hear it when it was really quiet. You could hear it squeaking, and the sound guy was going crazy. And then halfway through the scene, it stopped. And so he needed some wild track of that squeak, and we couldn't get it because it was off. So everyone was stopped, and we were thinking, what are we going to do? And the boom guy actually had some rubber tennis shoes on, and he started squeaking his foot on the ground. He goes, "I think this kind of sounds like it." And everyone was like, "Yeah, that sounds like it." And so everyone just shut up, and we had 30 seconds of this guy just squeaking his foot on the ground, which I thought was so funny and so cool. And I've never seen anything like it. I'd done 5 or 6 movies up at that point. I've never seen anything so freeform and open to whatever was going to happening right there. It was like the rules were out the door. The relationship between Bobby and Audrey, I think it became a MacGuffin. I don't know whether they were really going to go with it. I thought they were definitely going to go with it. We had those moments, but they brought in the character that Billy Zane played. And as soon as he came in, they sort of took it that way. So that's why I think it was a MacGuffin, or either a change of someone's mind, or I don't know. It was so on the fly always. The story kind of was flying. I mean, there was always the base, I guess. I don't really know how their minds worked when they were writing it, but I think that maybe things come up, though, as they go. They maybe didn't want to get them together. I don't know. Because I know at one point they wanted to get Cooper and her together. They were working towards that, and it ended up not happening the way that I think they were thinking it was going to happen. But that's Twin Peaks lore. It did show that there was this undercurrent of sadness, and it's much like sort of Blue Velvet, and there's underneath the beautiful grass, there's the bugs and the nastiness, and that's what was interesting about Twin Peaks, I think, and really touched on something that now television shows today, like Desperate Housewives, very unlike Twin Peaks, but in the sense that it's this pristine neighborhood, and you have all these normal people seemingly, but underneath there's all this weird shit going on, and I think that was one of the first times that I'd ever, in my television watching experience, had ever seen anything like it was Twin Peaks. So it was real, it was real is what it was.
I think I actually was auditioning for the Weepy Sheriff, and I thought, okay, the Weepy Sheriff, I'm here for the Weepy Sheriff. I don't know what the Weepy Sheriff's going to do or whatever. But he said, David, and he said, I'm thinking about you as Mike. And I said, okay. And he said, he tried to describe Mike to me. He's this guy, he's Bobby's friend, and he's, they terrorize this town, and he's tough, and he's this. And immediately I started just becoming a little more steely-eyed to him. And we just talked about the character for a bit, and 5 minutes later, I had the part. And if you ever met David, he sounds like Jimmy Stewart. There's not a cuss word that comes out of that man's mouth. Everyone thinks that, he's got this, he's deep, and he is, and intense and foreboding, but he's this gentle man that just is brilliant. But he's Gary. You ever been to the zoo? You ever been to the zoo? I said, yeah. He goes, the monkeys? The monkeys in the zoo? Yeah. He said, when they start to bark at each other, and then one of them starts going, and then the other starts going, and they all start going. And I said, no, not really. I've never been in the zoo when the monkeys start barking, but I said, I know what you're going for, and I'll try to do it. But that's how he described it to me. I want it like that, and it's just powerful and intense, and it's like boom, boom, boom. And so that's how we played it. There'd never been a show like that on television before. It was before HBO, and it was before all these edgy type of programs, NYPD Blue, and it was the first of its kind where I think America got caught off guard of, whoa, what's really happening under the surface? It was more about, and David's great with okay, this is what we're going to show you, and this is what's going on underneath. It's all about subtext and what, are they showing us your real face and unearthing these characters.
I have a very hard time finding decent headshots, even now, sometimes. And it's like, I can never decide on what it is. It's probably my fault. I probably get there trying too hard on the headshot. I'm like, hey, I don't know what. But he would not see me because of the headshot, and he refused. And she kept pushing me and selling me and pushing me and selling. This is the guy, and he'd look at it again, and it's like, Teen Beat magazine is awful. She goes, let me just bring him in. I'll risk my job on it. It's not the guy in the picture. And he goes, fine. And that's when he was like, oh, you're nothing like your picture. Okay, so from there it was pretty much it, Because he tends to cast, not all the time apparently, but he tends to cast a lot on feel. The best is that he came up to me when we were doing this, love scene. I think it was it might have been the second season, I'm not sure. He came up and kept sitting near me because he wasn't quite getting something and he didn't know what. And then he'd kind of look at me and walk away over and over again. And he did it on and on until I was going in my head, and he knew I was about to have a meltdown. And he comes walking up, and he kneels down about there, at my foot, and his whole body just went down into a ball, and all you saw was the brim of his hat, and his two hands were up here like this. It was like that scene. It reminded me of the scene in Eraserhead where she's pulling at the bed for about 20 minutes, and finally a suitcase falls out, and he's sitting there and he's going, James, until the crew started giggling. There was a point where he just closed down like this, and he just went like this, and the crew starts giggling and kind of laughing, and then he finally he sits up and looks at me and he goes, go for it. Oh my God, it's my favorite, all-time favorite. It's just totally him, and you know what it did? Lighten the mood of the set, everything breathed right, and it just flowed, and in 3 takes we got it. He was like, you know what, whatever you did was great. That's exactly what. And that, to me, that's just beauty. That's just beauty in motion.
Donna, what's wrong?
Nothing.
If I, have to go do a promotional thing or something in Europe or something, and I go there, it's like, oh my goodness. It's like all of Europe still loves Twin Peaks, and there's a lot of people in the States that do now still, and talk about it and everything. But what does surprise me is that it was taken off really at all.
Diane, when I've got a moment, remind me to tell you about Agent Bryson.
It was just a lark the way I actually got on the show, because I believe that my part was inspired by James Spader and written for him, and he wasn't able to do it. I mean, I was looking for any job that I could get. It wasn't like, gee, I'm a fan of Twin Peaks, let me make a phone call and get on Twin Peaks. I would have gone on whatever television show would have me at that point. I remember just getting a call to play a transvestite. I got the sides, they seemed very funny, and just going in and wondering, well, how do I go in and do it? Do I actually try to get in full drag and go there? But all I did was I brought a nail file, I think is what I did, and I just kind of did my nails while I did the scene, and I guess it was good enough. I'd never been in drag, and I thought, well, Jesus, how am I going to do that? I just kind of showed up on set. They nared my legs. I got put in a big dress, and we tried on wigs, and they slathered on, this white makeup over which they put, a skin tone, and it was just. And then I showed up on set. I think that when I auditioned very differently, because I must have auditioned much more stereotypically effeminate. And then when I put on all this makeup and everything, it became clear to me that less was more, that the presentation would be funnier if I didn't push it so hard. So then just kind of discovered that, having gone through the makeup.
Exactly how old is that girl? Denise, I would assume you're no longer interested in girls.
Coop, I may be wearing a dress, but I still put my panties on one leg at a time, if you know what I mean.
Not really.
The funniest thing that happened to me because of the Twin Peaks transvestite business was my father at the time, I think I shot the shows, and then my father had a quadruple bypass, and I went to visit him in Boston, and he was in the hospital, and he had just had the operation, and I think, you know, one of the 3 shows that I was airing, maybe the first one was airing, or the second, and because of the operation, he couldn't speak, but I could see that he was communicating to his nurses or whatever through writing down on this legal pad. And he was asleep, and I looked at the legal pad, and it said, you know, my feet are cold, I'd like some water, my son plays a transvestite on television. And I just thought, you know, they probably think he's hallucinating, you know, but he was probably just asking them to turn on the TV for him. I think David Lynch is a singular kind of a vision. I think he's a brilliant filmmaker and a brilliant writer. And I think, you know, his way of working, kind of improvisational, not within the scripts, but it appears that, you know, he kind of improvised the whole mythology of Twin Peaks as they went along is crazy, but and what you get out of that is just so much different from severely plotted out, you know, television shows, which most people have to do. You know, in the business of television, you've got to show, you know, you've got to show your 22 episodes even before you do them most of the times. You know, you got to show your storyline. So there was kind of improvised quality to it that is playful and amazing. And I just think it had a tone, you know, that surreal tone, and funny and scary. You know, a show that can be that funny and that scary. They don't come, I can't think of any other one. I mean, even the X-Files we'd do a funny one and a scary one, but we were never, it's hard to be funny and scary at the same time because they undercut each other in many ways. And Twin Peaks had established a tone where it was possible to be really funny and really scary at the same time. And that's an achievement, and I think people dig that.
I got the call that I was going to audition for David Lynch's new pilot, and they sent me 3 pieces of paper that had Shelley, Audrey, and someone else. I don't remember who the other woman was. Maybe Mrs. Packard or something. And I read those, and I went to my audition thinking I was going to have to actually do those parts. And all it was a meeting with David Lynch and Mark Frost in a really dark room with a really small table and a really bright light that showed down, and it was almost like a conspiracy meeting. And this was my opportunity to ask David Lynch every question I ever wanted to ask him, and every question any of my friends ever wanted to ask him. And I wasn't going to let that pass, because fat chance I would ever get to work on anything like that. David Lynch was awesome to work with because he would work with you, kind of like reach his arm into your mouth and down into your stomach and pull out a scene. Like, oh, here it is. It's all slimy, but let's shoot it. That was a good feeling. Like, take me, I'm yours kind of thing, which sometimes girls like that.
He's 9 years old.
I know. We think he was 6 at the time of the crime.
One day, I'm standing in my office cubicle, and Mark Frost comes up and says, he was like this and holding his arm like this, and said, we want you to do a dance. We know you dance, so we want you to make up a dance for us. We're gonna have a little talent contest. Well, it turned out to be a Twin Peaks pageant. We each had to do a little talent section, you know how they do in beauty contests. So I went home and in like 5 seconds choreographed something to Mac the Knife. And I wanted it to be kind of cheesy, kind of retro, and kind of jazzy in an old-fashioned way, like something you'd see some dancers do on the Ed Sullivan Show. It ended in a split. I jump in the air and land on the floor in a split, and my character's pregnant then. When I did it, it's so weird because everyone in the room went, "Oh my God, the baby!" And it was like, I'm not really pregnant. And then everywhere I went, after people saw that episode, "Weren't you afraid for the baby?" And each time I'd make up something different, like, "Oh, Lucy's had lots of kids before." "Really?" Or, "Oh, Lucy's got a uterus of steel." Or, so I just, depending on my mood, make up something about my pregnancy. It's a TV show. It's interesting to me that that people still study Twin Peaks in college, that people still are new. There's new fans all the time. I think it's because it was a series that changed TV. There had never been anything like that before. And it was a piece of art instead of just entertainment. And people will argue that it was David's most commercial piece of art yet, but I think Twin Peaks endures because it was the first series like that ever.
It was an evening audition, like at 8 o'clock or something. And when I got there, there were a lot of actors waiting to go in. And when they called you in, they had 2 chairs, one facing one way, one the other, like the seats at business class on British Airways. And there was a lot of people on a kind of a raised platform at the back, and David Lynch was waiting at that chair. Of course, the minute I opened my mouth, he said, "Where are you from?" And I told him the Ozarks, and he immediately started talking about fishing. And I answered him about fishing and about the Ozarks. And he asked if I had been in the military, and I told him I was a captain during the Vietnam period stationed in Korea. And he said, "Well, that's fine." And we just kept talking, and we kept talking. And finally, someone from among that group of people back there watching the audition said, "David, we've got other actors out there. We need to hear him read," or something. And he said, "Well, no, that's okay." He said, "I've only got one question. Can you cry on camera?" And I said, "Well, it just happens that I just finished playing Martin Sheen's partner in a film, and I had to cry on camera." And I said, "Yeah, I can cry." I said, "Hell, I cry on cartoons." And so that was the audition. The main thing I remember about that whole sequence with Windham being captured and chained to the shack wall, and before that, shot with the dart at the tree, was an unfortunate incident that occurred. We were filming out at the Burbank airport, and we had been fed a lunch, a Mexican lunch, which my favorite food is Mexican food. And I had eaten some refried beans. And when the dart hit and I fell, an elephant wouldn't have broken wind any louder than I did. Thank God my poop don't stink, or whatever. But there was a young girl working as a PA, assisting the props master, and she was a few feet from me. And she'd been very friendly up till that point. From that point on, she hated me. She wouldn't smile at me. She would probably turn and walk away anytime I came toward her. And I've never forgotten that. It's like losing a nice relative, all because of a fart. It's the only show I know that people go to a fan festival without getting paid for it. All we do is get free hotel rooms and some transportation if we got to fly a long way to get there. We go back so that we can see each other, say hi if we are all in different areas of the world, and catch up on each other. There was a real family there, and the key to that family, the spine on which it was built, is basically David Lynch.
I guess because she's in this wheelchair, and when we did the pilot, there was, a certain idea that she'd been in this automobile accident. And at first I thought, she was crippled, but then I remember at different times wondering if she was really crippled or if it was psychological.
I know something's going on with you and Benjamin Horne, and I want to know what it is.
I remember talking to David at different times and Mark about it. And they wouldn't really answer my questions because I always wanted more information about but then later, I think really at the very end, they said, oh, well, we had so many different scenarios about what, could have happened. And in a way, you think as an actor that you'd really like to know an exact, the facts sort of, but really, a lot of it doesn't matter that much, whether she's really physically crippled or whether she had this affair and then is consumed with guilt and is in a wheelchair. Who knows? But in a way, if she believes she's crippled, it doesn't really matter. So they sent me a wheelchair, and I was, I'd practice all the time. I'd get in the wheelchair and sort of ride around my house and their living room. And one day some people came over. I don't know who it was, but someone wanted to look at our house. And I was kind of driving around in the wheelchair. And then at some point, I just turned the wheelchair off and started walking around. And I kind of remember at the time this look in the people's eyes. They didn't know I was an actress. They didn't know. So suddenly this woman gets up, is in this wheelchair. And then she suddenly gets up and starts walking around. We would get these phone calls because I think Caleb was directing one of the episodes, and nobody knew who Killer Bob was. And so I remember getting these, scripts. He'd have the real script and no one else would. And, we'd get strange messages on the phone. And so there was this kind of feeling in our whole house about, the sort of mysteries of Twin Peaks. And my daughter, who she was in 8th grade, so she was 13, and she'd get on the bus every, I think it was Friday morning after the Thursday night show, and all the kids, everybody would be talking about Twin Peaks, and everywhere you went, everyone was talking about it. I think Twin Peaks changed television. It changed everything, a whole way of looking at things and doing things, that things didn't have to be sort of tied up at the end of every show. You could have the show that was so complex and layered that you had to really watch it, and it just took in so many parts of you. I guess because, David, this sort of intuitive part and dream part and all of those things, but it just involves so many more different parts of the brain and the mind. And honestly, I'd say, most of the good television and movies and everything have been completely changed by Twin Peaks.
Well, I got this script, and it wasn't anything like television that I remember. It didn't resemble anything like that, and I thought, wow, this is great. And I went in, and there all the powers that be were. The darling Joanna Ray, who loves actors, so I felt comfortable. And Leslie Glatter and David and whatnot. There was a line at the end of the scene when Laura Flynn Boyle says, "I'll be back." And the line was, "I'll see you then." And I said, "I'll be here."
I'll be back.
I'll be here. And they liked that. They kind of giggled. And so I kind of knew when I left that was a slam dunk. I thought, good. And then it all began. And I was very happy. I was very happy. I knew going in that Harold would meet his demise some way. I didn't know how, But so that gave me bookends, so I could create within that sphere of experience. And so I felt very close to him by that time, and I got the new pages, and it says, you know, we find Harold hanging. And I called David up and got his machine, and I left this long rambling message. I said, what if you pan into the apartment and you go into the greenhouse, and all you hear throughout is this sound, and you find leaning over all the orchids, every one of them's just sort of bent over, and then you find him lying there with his prized possessions, and to me that was poetic. And I left all this, you know, on his message, and he called me back and he said, Lenny never come up with a good idea the night before a shoot. We've got the thing rafter built, you know, we got to do it. You're hanging. So they hung me, but actually they hung someone else. But, you know, the spirit of him was there, I hope. Well, I think by the very nature that it was so revolutionary in its content and its style. I mean, you had somebody who was, you know, playing the record at a different speed, and people weren't used to it, and it evoked all these strong responses. People either loved it or they didn't, and they didn't a lot, or they just didn't get it, you know. And that to me is great art, you know. If it evokes strong responses, if it is visceral. And how much of television is these days?
David and I met originally when we did Eraserhead. It was, you know, I can't remember the exact year, but I think it was somewhere around 71, maybe. It was just before he was doing Eraserhead. So we had known each other for a long time. And at the time he was planning to do Twin Peaks, Jack and I were sharing a house in North Hollywood. And we knew Jack was going to do it because David had told him that. And we went out to dinner one night for David's birthday, and he made this enormous cactus plant, you know, to give him as a present, which is pretty funny if you know David. You know, it wasn't a big party, it was kind of small. And I saw them looking at me at the end of the table, and I'm thinking, you know, Laura and Kyle and David, they're all kind of looking. And it was right after that Mark says, you know, we're thinking of, you know, having you play Betty Briggs. I thought, you know, who's that? We'd all gather in this sports bar and watch the show, because toward the end we didn't even have scripts. We had our scene, and that's all. We didn't even know what happened in the show. So we would all get together and, you know, kind of try to piece it together. And I remember one night we were at Dana Ashbrook's, we were having a spaghetti dinner. It was the last episode of the first season, and Agent Cooper opens the door and he gets shot. Oh my God, we thought we'd all lost our jobs. We thought we were out of work. We couldn't figure out where it was going to go from there. So we just, you know, it was quite funny. It was unique. It came at a time when television was boring. It was on during the week, so the next day people at work could all talk about it. I mean, there was nothing like it on television. Absolutely nothing like it.
This world of Twin Peaks seems to be filled with beautiful women.
I remember wanting it so much, and I thought, you know, the character breakdown was supposed to be this beautiful girl who all the men were fawning and doting over, and they were tongue-tied around her, and she was just supposed to be just this drop-dead gorgeous beauty. And so right away I was already intimidated because the women on the show were so beautiful, and I thought, I want this part so much. I have to do something different. You know, I've got to do something that's going to make me stand out. So bearing that in mind, in my head I started reading it with a Southern accent.
I want to win the Miss Twin Peaks contest.
Oh, of course. Well, I've been known to make a speech or two in my time. I'll coach you day and night.
Oh, no, sweetheart. Baby, that's not what I'm talking about. Now, you're one of the judges.
And to me, I thought that's that's her secret weapon, you know? I mean, that's what makes the men love her, and that's how she gets them to be putty in her hands, and that's how she charms them with her Southern accent, her dingbat act. And so I thought to myself, well, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to do it, and either they're going to love it or they're going to hate it. But I will probably definitely make an impression. So, and then I got it. The dance, contortionistic dance, jazz erotica, whatever it was called. I remember reading that when I got the script. And by the way, you know, it was such my scene. I would never get a full script. I would just get pages with my scenes, and as everyone, I'm sure, but they were stamped with a number across every single page. So I really didn't know what was going on or what to expect, or, you know, I would just get the little pages that I had. And anyway, so I read the scene that I'm going to be in the pageant, which I was so excited about. I've done a few pageants myself, being from the South. So I read the scene and it said she does a contortionistic jazz dance erotica, and I thought, oh my gosh, what are they doing to me? And I thought, you know, I can do a lot of things, but this really kind of surpasses my acting skills.
There, my friend, is a real artist.
I think people love the show because it had so many elements to it that no one ever attempted to do. First of all, the era was fantastic. The mystery. The people were stunning to look at. And the creator of the show, David Lynch, is a genius. So right there, I mean, you've got just a winning combination. I thought the show was just brilliant. And it was so much like a movie to me. It wasn't like a television series, you know, you'd sit down and watch every week. It was so much, there was so much more to it than that. And it was interesting. You had all these different characters, and you never really could figure it out, you know? And I'm just sad that it didn't last longer.